Welcome to Accelerate OC, the only show focused on the people leading innovation in Orange County. Join our host, Kerry Ransom, in his conversations with the trendsetters, entrepreneurs, investors, and leaders here, because it's time to Accelerate OC.
Good morning. Welcome to Accelerate OC. I'm Kerry Ransom. And thanks always to our engineer, Paul, for making me and my guests sound so good. Today's episode is sponsored by OC4 Venture Studio, which is a new tech startup, company building platform, and community here in Orange County, which is where Accelerate OC also focuses. If you're looking for help with your startup or opportunities to work with the next generation of high growth startup companies here, or you want to be part of the Orange County startup community, you can find us at oc4v.com. I am happy to have my friend Sergey Sundukovskiy here on Accelerate OC today. And before we get to hear from him and his experiences and wisdom as a longtime entrepreneur and tech leader, I first wanted to give you a quick introduction to Sergey. So he's currently the founder or co-founder and CTO and chief product officer of CERTEMY, which is a software startup here that's building a platform for the professional certification, licensing, and compliance industry. Prior to that, he was also the CTO and chief product officer of Raken, a software company in the construction industry. And prior to that, he was also, among other things, he was CTO of a company that he was a key leader in and sold to Capital One, where he took on a senior engineering role as well about 5 years ago. So we'll talk a little bit about the experience of selling into a big corporate like Capital One. He's been around here for quite a while and has really been a consistent serial early stage tech and internet company leader, even going back to the prior era that I get to talk to some folks about, the .com era. And we both lived through that and still remain standing to this day. And I always have enjoyed our conversations. He has great perspective and wisdom on a number of things beyond technology. He really is thoughtful about company building, investing, how to build teams, how to build cultures. And he also is very giving of his time and his talents. He mentors and advises entrepreneurs and companies through a number of different incubators and accelerators, both in Southern California and even virtual ones across the world. Sergey, it's really good to have you here on Accelerate OC today.
Kerry, thank you so much for having me.
Yes, so let's get to the starting line. Tell us a bit about your current venture, CERTEMY, and how you decided to get involved in this opportunity.
I would love to. So CERTEMY, as you mentioned, is a SaaS platform for licensing, certification, and compliance management. It's a SaaS platform that we offer to the companies that either want to issue certification and enforce licensing and compliance, or want to just to get started. Without us, if you think what CERTEMY gives to its clients, without us, it's really an Excel spreadsheet where top down you have a list of names, and left to right you just have a list of states where you have people going through the education and going through the testing and going through a compliance steps. And as you can imagine, it gets pretty tedious, especially if you need to manage hundreds and thousands of professionals that need to maintain their licensing and certification. According to Bureau of Statistics, we have 43 million people that hold at least one license or one certification.
That's so. The question I was going to ask you, so you just sort of teed it up. Huge market from a standpoint of people with a certification or a license, and so I think that this is a very interesting topic to explore around being an entrepreneur, because you got a huge potentially addressable market. How did you guys go about the process of determining that there was something that, in this case, software, that people were going to be willing to pay for to manage this, right? Like, coming up with the problem, or even you mentioned the Excel spreadsheet, the return on investment case that a lot of your buyers are clearly going to have to go through.
CERTEMY, just like many other startups, is a case of scratch your own itch. CERTEMY got started by Oleg Schwartz, who was a doctor, and he just ran into issues keeping up with his certification and licensing management. And just like what would the entrepreneur do is look at the problem and try to come up with a solution. And we came together as 4 co-founders a bit later in the micro pivot. And all of us 4 founders look at the problem and look at the market. So obviously, as you mentioned, the TAM is really huge. But when you're looking at the TAM, you're deciding whether this TAM is addressable. Is whatever you're going to do is going to be it's going to be implementable. If it's going to be logical, and you're going to be able to offer a solution that's both easy and configurable, and is going to be able to be sold to that TAM. And this is how it came together. We determined that the market is definitely big. The solution is there, and it can be done. It can be done both profitably, and we can put it together in relatively short period of time.
Yeah, I think this is a great example. I mean, that last point you make about relatively short period of time. There's clearly a business problem. There's an efficiency problem that exists. I don't know that I, on the surface, see a really complicated technology problem. So how are you guys thinking about a defensibility, or what the things that you really need to stand on as your differentiators for this business?
So if you look at any business, and especially business as it comes to software that, as you mentioned, is not extremely complicated, and you will find that majority of the startup ideas are not really complicated. Technologies are not complicated, and the simpler, as everybody looks at Uber and everybody looks at Slack, people say, I had that idea before. Sure. This is not complicated. It's easy to do. So really the moat around the business is ability to execute on your ideas, yes, is to define the goals and to meet the timeline of delivering this to market quickly enough where you're going to get some traction, and you're going to have replacing incumbents is extremely difficult. You need to be, as a company, to be replaced, you need to be treating your customers poorly, you need to be regressive, not deliver software on time, be buggy. So a lot of times when you hear companies going out of business or losing their market share, they're just basically asleep at the wheel.
Yeah, I think that is not discussed nearly as frequently as possible, right? There is one school of potential entrepreneurship in just looking at existing incumbents in markets and working to do it better enough than they are, because the innovator's dilemma of the existing business just trying to maintain where they are is a real impediment, and I think it's as you're seeing, I think in the early traction of your business, there are markets that can be quickly penetrated by just building a really better solution.
Markets, these sort of markets can be easily penetrated because usually there's incumbents that are either providing the software that's so custom and takes so long to build and so long to adapt that the customers are really unhappy, and they're ready to move. They just don't have an attractive option for them. And this is more of an MO for me because as with my previous company, a lot of times I address problems which are being handled either poorly by incumbents or really by pen and paper. So if you look at the compliance software, our customers are really compliance and certification and licensing software. Our customers are really fall into 2 categories. They're either pretty big, but they have custom built software that they invested millions of dollars, or you have really small ones and they just simply can't afford it and they're using pen and paper. So at least 65% of the market is using just pen and paper and Excel. And that's the real opportunity. It's a blue ocean opportunity that we can go and address. Now, some of the existing companies will also see that they're just simply tired of maintaining that software. They're really they're in certification and licensing business. They're not in software development business. But we see as much as 50% of their budget is spent maintaining that custom software, and that's just really tough. And quite often with companies that I either start or join, they're basically addressing that problem. There are becoming less and less industries out there that can be addressed this way, but certification and compliance is certainly one of them.
Yeah, and maybe not an obvious business that people are going to wake up and get super excited, but you're solving real problems for both people that are maintaining, as you said, with pen and paper, or people that are in this business and haven't gone through that digital transformation, or maybe they went through a first phase, like you said, building their own, but they're ready to get out of that business of maintaining software and would rather rent it from an expert like you guys.
And as a founder, I typically approach joining the startups or deciding on the idea, trying to understand if this is a real problem and it has a real solution. So a lot of times I see startup founders thinking about the problems that don't really exist, right? Yes. They make up a solution and they go around looking for a problem. So one of the first things I look at when I look at the problem, I analyze whether that's a real problem, right? It's not and the solution is a painkiller as opposed to a vitamin. So those are the necessary, certainly not sufficient, but necessary qualities of the idea is to look at real problem and look at the real solution, practical solution that can be delivered on time and on target to address that market.
Yeah, some great words of wisdom in there, Sergey. Thanks for sharing those. So let's go into the hood just a little bit more here. So the company's underway. You have a team. We were just talking off the air. You've really, this is your first startup where you have a truly distributed team with founders in several different locations. So first, let's just talk about where the company is at this point. So you've got, team size, you've got some capital into the business, you've got some customer traction. So give the audience sort of an overview of where you are now and what you see for 2020.
Well, we're in several locations, as you said. This is the first company that's done in truly distributed manner. So we don't have a single office where all are, but we travel between multiple places. So we have an office in OC, we have an office in San Diego, and again, these are sort of temporary offices with WeWorks and whatnot. So and there's another one in LA, and our customer success and sales team are in Jersey. So again, very, very distributed, and this is the first time I'm doing something like this, and there's definitely some pros and cons in getting it done this way. You certainly lose some magic of the hallways when people are not in the same location, and you need to pay some tuition. The currency that you use is constant communication and Slack and additional meetings that you need to have in order to keep everybody abreast of what's going on.
Sure. So yeah, I think that's a reality, and I've posited as well now that Southern California is becoming an increasing tech startup center, and I use Southern California as a sort of Santa Barbara to San Diego. You're already evidence with people in 3 different submarkets that is a possibility. I've posited that over the next decade, I think we'll see some very large companies emerge that have multiple nodes in Southern California. So whether that's doing like you did with downtown LA and OC and San Diego, and maybe CERTEMY becomes one of those large companies with multiple nodes. But I think that is an increasing reality because the tools and tech are there, and the lifestyle of not commuting hours and hours per day is, I think, something more and more senior executives like you are attentive to, and saying it's just we can still be really productive. So do you think that that's a likely path, or do you think people are going to revert back to face to face, 5 days a week?
I think we're never going back to 9 to 5.
Sure.
Their pendulum is definitely swinging towards fully distributed companies, and you see some unicorns out there. They're basically fully distributed. Zapier being one of them, Envision being another, and it's certainly not an easy thing to do. But you will find that technology-centric companies will find technical talent anywhere they can find. Technology teams have been distributed for quite some time. I started doing outsourcing almost 20 years ago, so this is definitely not new for technology departments. You see technical resources being offshore, being locally co-located. At the same time, we see additional movement on the business side to be distributed as well. But that's exactly for the same reasons. It's difficult. We're in great economy, and it's difficult to find resources because everybody's gainfully employed. If you have to pick up your family and move it, it's certainly very difficult. So quite often this will be something, and it moved from well, it would be nice to have to now it's more or less expected that position either is in person or it's a remote position. So it's being requested a lot more as an expectation from Gen Z.
Sure. I think that is the reality. So one of the things we were talking about off the air, and I'm curious how you think this maybe helps mitigate some of the potential challenges of a new venture that's distributed, is that several of the folks that you're working with, several of your even co-founders, are folks that we both know from prior lives, right? We were realizing just how small the technology world is here. What is it about those kind of prior relationships and the trust and comfort of working with folks like that you most appreciate as you think about a new business?
Since founding my first company, I basically told myself I won't start companies with people I don't know, because if you look at the stats, just besides the fact that what I think and what others think, if you look at the stats. In terms of startup failure, you will see that 85% of the time when companies do fail, and I mean lights out, this will be because of the founder breakup. And this is certainly precipitated by other problems that startups have, but relationships are one of the key things in order to get the startup to work. First of all, startups are a team sport, and as a team sport, it's highly collaborative, and it's a lot easier to collaborate with people that you know. That's one. Number two, you know their style of working together, and decision making and culture building becomes a lot easier when you do know people, and that's one of the key things that I'm looking at when I'm evaluating a startup. Do they are the people who are getting together, do they have a track record of execution? That's one. Number two, do I know them, or do I know the people that know them that can give me a reference, and I can basically evaluate what's the risk factor of people getting getting together.
Yeah, I think that's a lot of great thoughts in there. Here's a question for I'll ask this for the audience. Let's say I haven't done this before. I don't have these relationships with the right types of people who might have the appetite to be co-founders, to work with me. What's some advice on how to potentially get into a network where I could find those folks?
Well, OC would be one of the great examples where we have quite a few communal efforts that are being emerged and coalesced, and going to those things and just trying to find people that you gel well. That's one. Number two, trying to do maybe a pilot project together. I think that's another. Quite often, if you're a first-time founder, then you want to surround yourself with some talent, and a lot of times it takes a form of advisors. But again, lately advisors have been getting some bad names. We're getting a bad name because people are just simply were names on the deck as opposed to being really involved with the business. So it now being rebranded as advisory positions, where it's an advising CTO or advising CPO or advising CMO or even advising CEO. You have somebody who's not just giving you advice, but really executing, right? And this reminds me of an IBM commercial. Well, we don't do what we propose, we just propose it. So as long as you don't end up in those relationships and you get together with people who are actually not just giving you advice, but helping you even on a part-time basis. This is a really nice way to get to know people and get to figure out if you would be a good founding team.
Yeah, I think there's great thoughts in there. I mean, the summary from my perspective is it's relational, and sometimes the only way to get there is time. And to build that relationship in some way. But I think there's some great ideas there you shared on ways to sort of build that relationship, not just having coffee and conversations, but actually doing some things together.
Absolutely. It might appear that you gel well when you just, when you get together for coffee, but really working together, going through some stressful situations, which what startups are. It's certainly an extreme situation where you're going to be under a lot of pressure across the board, from your customers, from your potential customers, internally, from your co-founders, from investors, from your family. I think that this is all stressful, and working together through those stressful situations is going to tell you if it's going to work or not.
Yeah, great points. I think a key part of why we started OC4 here was to really try to create an environment for people, maybe before they've even begun, to have a safe place to come try some of these things on, or be around others who are feeling some of that stress and pressure to see if it fits them. And so there is, I think there historically has maybe been a lack of those places where people can show up, and we need many of those here, because I think the reality, as we look at our economy over the next decade, we need more founders, we need more starters, and that's the thing I wanted to talk to you about next. But I think that's the reality of Orange County, is we need more new businesses getting off the ground here to really start to change the economy.
I absolutely agree with you. It's I firmly believe, just as in business, as in other endeavors, it's a build-up and breakthrough situation. If you don't have a build-up, you won't have a breakthrough.
Yes. So
if you don't have a community, if you don't have people coming together, if you don't see others going through the same things as you are, it's easy to think that, especially when I started my first startup, I thought I was exceptionally either unlucky or exceptionally stupid, even though I had a PhD in business, and I thought that the startup stuff is going to be super easy for me, but it wasn't, because in business school they don't teach you what to do when you have just $1. They teach you what to do when you have $1 billion, but they don't tell you how to start things and be everything that you need to be for your company, and how to deal with stress and pressure. Going through it is extremely unnerving and difficult. Seeing others go through the same experience and hearing that almost acts as a therapy session, right? Where you when you realize that you're not unique. You're going through the same set of problems or challenges. And it ultimately rewards as others do. Yes,
and I mean, right on cue. Okay, you feel like you read all of my questions ahead of time, Sergey. One of the reasons I started Accelerate OC was exactly what you just said, was to share some of those stories. I mean, there are amazing innovators and founders and folks like you here in Orange County, and the stories just aren't captured and told nearly as frequently. You've been a serial company founder or co-founder. What is it? I mean, you had those early challenges, as you just said. What is it that's kept you going to continue to have the confidence to keep doing this? I mean, I look in the mirror sometimes and question my sanity of why do I keep doing this over and over? But I just have sort of concluded it's who I am as a person. So What is it that keeps you going?
Well, certainly startup founders have a particular DNA. I think if you analyze what kind of people make good good startup founders, you will see that there's on top 5 personality traits. Certainly, conscientiousness, now being branded as grit, is definitely part of it. My wife would say stubbornness, but it's a good kind of stubbornness. Is to set the goal and to accomplish it. And I think that's certainly necessary, but not sufficient enough. You need to have a good team around you. You need to have investors. You need to have experience. So all of these things have to come together. That's why you don't see startup hubs emerging in one day in one particular location. It takes time. It takes effort. It takes money, and it takes some experience. And these things have to come together as ingredients in order to make a good startup community.
So, what as you look back and reflect a little bit? I mean, I mentioned earlier, you were part of a founding team, sold a company to Capital One, which is one of the biggest financial institutions in our country. You had I'm guessing, a fairly comfortable position inside there after the acquisition. I mean, what was it that kept you going back to the startup world when you could have, after already having done several, having a nice outcome, chilled out for a while and hung out there? What was it that brought you back?
It happens every time. So when you build a company, especially if you specialize in B2B companies, the company gets acquired. If you as an entrepreneur, if you look at the stats, then you see that companies, there's only a handful of companies, maybe 150 to 200 companies a year that go public. Rest of the companies are getting acquired. So there's 14,000 acquisitions in the United States. There's a high likelihood that you're going to get acquired. And as a matter of fact, if you're thinking about starting a company in B2B space, 7 out of 10 exits are basically B2B companies. And usually what happens, when you get acquired, you have to come with because personnel and the founders are part of the acquisition. If you don't come with, then there's no deal. And as part of that, you need to do a corporate stint. Again, companies, if you get acquired by a big company like Capital One, especially if it's a bank, you start missing some of that agility that you had as a startup. And, when you are a startup, you're just hoping to be acquired because you want that steady paycheck and you want that payout. And then once you're in a large company, you immediately start thinking, well, there's quite a few things here that I want to change, but it's difficult because large companies it's a ship that it takes more decisions are made by consensus because you just can't drive it like a small dinghy. It just doesn't happen. The big companies will fall apart if they have to make strategy decisions every day. So some of that nimble nature is basically what brings you back, and just ability. Also, just by nature, I spend a lot of time executing, just as I spend time on strategy, being a co-founder. But I also spend time as a product guy and as a technology guy, and I just really enjoy it. I feel if I don't do it, you become stale, and you quickly, especially in the technology industry, you just simply become outdated, and what used to be right is not right anymore, and you're even worse off not knowing anything. Because you're literally acting on the information that used to be right but now is wrong. And I immensely enjoy product because I feel that value of product gets it's underestimated, but it's also becoming more and more prominent. The value of design and value of product is key to getting the customer delight.
Yes, for sure. So let's talk about that for a bit. I mean, you have this really strong and continuously evolving technical leadership background. So you've been a technical leader in a number of companies, and we were talking just before the show about how in many of your companies over the last decade or so, you've also been the chief product officer. And I would consider you one of the few enlightened technical leader who also has been that product leader. And what is it that you feel like, has equipped you to do that well? Because often there is that sort of belief in a separation between engineering and product, that there needs to be two different personalities there. But there's, I'm sure, some great synergy and power from having it under your oversight. What is it about you that's because to me that's the future of technical leadership, and we need to figure out how to harness and create more of you here. That I think that could really serve Orange County well.
If you look at the perimeter of concern from a product perspective and technology perspective, technology is primarily responsible for answering the question of how. Mm-hmm. And product is responsible for answering the what. Mm-hmm. And I see an interesting dichotomy when founders get together. A lot of times you will see multiple either product-centric founders, mm-hmm. or technology-centric founders getting together. In other words, they're birds of the feather. And what happens in that case is you either have how-centric solutions, mm-hmm. On the technology side, or you have product-centric solutions which are not practical. Combining those qualities is extremely important. Understanding both the limitations of the technology, but also making sure it's product-centric. So that's one of the things, mm-hmm. that distinguishes what I've done in my career, is to start in technology, but very quickly realizing that without the product understanding, without the what, the how is not going to be very useful. So that's one thing. The other thing is, quite often when startups get founded, they get founded by, let's just say it's a product and a technology guy or a gal that are, mm-hmm. getting together. And one of them decides that, well, you know coding, so you're going to be a CTO. So the CTO is really a misnomer, because initially it starts out with just somebody who knows more about the, mm-hmm. technology. So I feel that baked in the definition of the CTO is love and understanding of the product. Mm. If you don't really have it, then you're not really a CTO. So I feel that there's already a product slant that's baked into a CTO title. I think that's incredibly valuable and how do you teach those technical leaders that are really just how I want to solve technical problems, Sergey? I'll let them just tell me what it is we need to build, and then I'm going to do it in this most elegant technical, as you said, how do you convince them that they need to be much more embracing of the customer, the product, the problem space itself? And when I look at startups, a lot of startups, especially technology-driven startups, treat their technology as a science fair, right? So it's a long discussions about what's going to be the best way to implement it technically, and there's just takes quite a long time for a best technology solution to come together. And that's one of the follies of technologists. And we as computer scientists are taught in school to find the best way. But there's a difference between computer science and software engineering. So it's just not taught well in school that delivering the product that will delight the customer and that might fall short in some areas on the technology side, it's still okay. Especially as it comes to startups, because there's just a lot more difficult problems to figure out than technology. So that's one. Number two, if you're excited about the technology more than you're excited about the idea, then you probably shouldn't be a CTO. It doesn't mean you don't have a place in the company. You certainly do. As a chief architect, as I held these positions before, both on the development side and just across the entire engineering spectrum, there's nothing wrong with that, but there's a specific mindset that comes to a technologist that's working within the startup and needs to deliver business value and needs to balance a lot of different things that are not technology first.
Oh, that's Paul. Am I allowed to go across the table here and give my guest a hug? I mean, this is I'm sitting here going, all right, what are we going to start together, Sergey? Because we could not be more aligned in our views about this. And so I'm going to put
Well,
that
we are starting something.
Yeah,
we're starting a community in
That's
OC.
right.
So
That's right.
this is certainly a start.
So how do we get more? I mean, to that point, how do we get more technical folks to have that appetite to go be a founder or a co-founder? I mean, there are just tremendous. I know many great technical leaders and folks here. How do we get them comfortable with having an appetite to go be a co-founder or a founder and start more companies here? Because the beauty is there's so many products to be built and problems still to solve. You guys found a great market opportunity in licensing and certification, and there are dozens, hundreds more to be done out there. How do we get more people to show up and say, I'm ready, let's go?
Well, one of the things you need to make sure if people don't move away, engineers don't move away as soon as they graduate from college, because there's a greater draw. If you look at it, if you look at the Bay Area, if you look at San Diego, there's a strong draw to go into those geos and start working there. Now, in order for you to, as an engineer, to rationalize staying in OC, you need a lot of companies, or you need a lot of ideas. You need a lot of business ideas, and you need them funded. But you also need experienced people who can show you that there is another career path than simply becoming a technologist and going and working for Google or Amazon or any of those hardcore technology companies. And at the end of the day, a lot of people are just simply not, or a lot of engineers are not aware of the ideas, or they have they're not aware of the opportunities that are open to them in startups, and their understanding of startups is really generalized or idealized, and their idea that within a couple of years they're going to join a startup and work hard and make millions of dollars is still extremely prevalent. So I think having education, or having all kinds of community events where engineers can meet other more senior engineers and look at their career. So we should have more experienced people just presenting and talking about their career and some of the choices that they made, and what would other choices they would have otherwise made if they knew what they know now.
I think that's a great. I'm going to have you be one of my first guests. We're going to do that event, and we'll do it at OC4 for sure. Because I totally agree. We had a group of really bright and energetic computer science and engineering folks from UC Irvine in our office yesterday, and they could so benefit from hearing some of those thoughts and experiences from you and others here. So I love it.
Absolutely. Where do I sign up?
Take away. Yeah, we got it. So as you think about Orange County as a place for technology innovation and startups, what are some areas that you think we as a community should be thinking about over the next decade and saying, these are ones I feel like we have the right DNA, we have the right assets to be a leader in, and we should be looking at how do we pull people together, how do we pull funding together and get more companies off the ground?
Okay, it's a really good question. So if you look at various areas, startup areas, where startups have flourished, you will find that some of them, like New York or Silicon Valley or LA or San Diego, they're known for a particular thing. So if you look at New York, it's the financial industry. If you look at LA, it's entertainment. If you look at San Diego, it's life sciences. If you look at Silicon Valley, I'm not sure if there is a specific focus for Silicon Valley. But there's an underestimated value of being a generalist. When people ask me, what specifically is there an area where you specialize? I say it pridefully that there isn't a specific area where I tell myself, well, this is where I'm going to plant my flag. I'm certainly specializing in SaaS B2B companies, but at the same time, it's a cross-cutting concern. So being more of a generalist is highly underestimated. So I feel that Orange County could, without any specialty, still be special because it's cross-cutting and you can come here and start any company.
That's
because when the entrepreneur looks at the idea, then if they have to tell themselves, well, this is not the area where you start because it's not impacted in this particular area because, we just do entertainment here. If I don't have an entertainment idea, I have to move away. Now, if OC is very much a generalist, then if it's suited for general startups, then you will have a lot more startups being started here. And then if the area of specialty emerges, that's fine. We're certainly strong in real estate here. We have B2B slant, so there's quite a few areas. Especially, I've never seen so many physical products being developed in this area. If you look at Silicon Valley, it's sort of kryptonite, and there's just not a ton of VCs are touching anything that's physical product related. But I saw a lot more upstarts and startups here being grounded and in a particular physical product.
Yeah, I think there's definitely a class of folks here that believe that's a key area maybe of specialty. If you look at our history as surf industry and electrical components and defense, and that there is a kind of a maker culture here, and we have brands. So I love the contrarian thought you have, which I think it's unfortunate that it's contrarian, but that general support. And I've said, this county was built by entrepreneurs. There is a can-do, creative, problem-solving attitude that I think just runs through this whole area. And you have tens of thousands of small to medium-sized companies that were started and built here. And so there are a whole crop of entrepreneurs. They're starters, they're operators, and that should give us the confidence to go create companies in new realms that maybe we don't have a huge amount of center of gravity or expertise in. But I as you talk about generalist, I think of myself largely that way. And what I like to say is I'm the type of person who just likes to go figure things out. And I'm sure you're very similarly minded. And if we as a culture here just accept, hey, we can figure anything out. We can build any kind of company here. And if you look at even just my guests on this show, it runs a wide gamut of different kinds of companies and industries. And so I love this. I think there's so much power in just saying we can do it. We just have to start.
Regardless of what the idea is, we can absolutely do it. And again, I absolutely second that. Wide ranges and wide gamuts of various industries, and it's important to the mindset. If I would say anything is critical to a startup and a startup founder is the mindset of can do. No idea is beyond me, and I will try to isolate that kernel of innovation, that flash of genius, and I will build a company around it. I think that's where the magic is, right? It's not in a particular vertical that's highly impacted. It's really in the mindset.
That's right. So as you think about that, what resources do you feel like are still lacking in support of aspiring or early founder entrepreneurs here that we as a community should be being a little bit more intentional about trying to make sure is in place?
So what's lacking is bringing together, I feel that there's plenty of talent here who either built a company and exited, have been working in some particular company or an industry for 20 years, and there's plenty of experience to be harnessed. So it's the opportunity. So I feel what's still lacking, is an opportunity for these folks to come together and to contribute in a meaningful way, as having enough of the resources where the tipping point is going to occur when you have senior talent that's looking to contribute to the early stage startup. So you literally combining experience with useful energy of companies wanting to start here, and then what's going to coalesce it together is funding that comes into Orange County. The more VCs are going to move in and set up shop, the more you're going to have those three things coming together as an experience, useful energy, and money.
That's great. So, Sergey, we're getting toward the end here. What is it about Orange County that you most appreciate? You've been here for a while and been in Southern California for a while. What do you most appreciate about being here?
I really appreciate the lifestyle. When my wife said, "Okay, well, what do you think about going to Orange County?" We're living in Redondo Beach, and I really like that. But Orange County offered from in our particular case, our three kids were artistically inclined. They wanted to go and explore opportunities in OSHA, and two of my kids did, and they really enjoy it. So I think the combination of lifestyle and opportunities is really what brought me in and what's keeping me in. I think if you look at the entire California, from San Francisco to San Diego, I think we probably got the best mix of still fairly relaxed atmosphere, but business-like attitude and demeanor.
Mm-hmm. I think that's a great summary there, that last sentence. So, Sergey, final lap. Paul's giving me the time sign over here. I always like to have my guests share a final either lesson or piece of wisdom that they'd like to impart. So as you think about other primarily technology entrepreneurs, that's the realm that you and I both tend to spend most of our time in. As you think about that community here, it's a growing community and one that we want to continue to support. What lessons or words of advice would you have for them?
Well, I have two advices, or rather, one for each for a particular individual. If you haven't started a company yet, but you're thinking about it, the quicker you start, the better. And you don't need to jump 2 feet in, but keep in mind that startups is not an expert field. It's a practitioner field. And the only way you're going to get good at it is start doing it. So that's for somebody who never started. For somebody who has started, I think one of the most difficult things, and it's almost impossible to get super practical advice about, is at what point do you need to turn back? I always compare this. You need to turn back and do something else. You need to pivot. So this is a very difficult situation because you don't know how far you are from your eventual goal. I always give an example when I'm a avid diver, and I free dove in Catalina, and 1 year I was able to make 35 feet without a tank. And the reason I dove this deep is because I saw this deep, right? I was able to see the bottom, and I was able to push myself and reach that bottom. So you need to build some tripwires, and you need to build some clarity of vision, or develop some early signs that you're on the right path. And sometimes it's your other co-founder, sometimes it's other people that can give you advice, but at the end of the day, you need to build those tripwires so you're not just 1 inch away and you just need to keep pushing, or you just need to turn back and micro pivot.
Oh, I think that's so. That could be a whole episode and conversation on
all
its
by
own,
itself. That's right.
Of just and the value of having those other folks around to help you with a lens or a mirror or whatever the analogy that you may need. So that's great. Well, Sergey, thank you so much for taking us along on this ride today and sharing, as I knew you would, your experiences and wisdom with us. And thanks for being such a giving mentor to others here and to the community. And, I know you guys are going to do great on an ongoing basis with CERTEMY, and excited to see what's in store for you in 2020 and beyond. You're definitely doing your part to accelerate OC. Thanks for all you do.
Carrie, thank you so much. It's been a pleasure.
You've just listened to Accelerate OC. Join our live recordings every Tuesday morning at accelerateoc.com or listen, like, and share anytime from your favorite podcast spot. Let's accelerate OC together.